The fluorescent lights of the dealership hummed overhead, too bright, too white, bouncing off polished glass and chrome. Aaliyah felt them pressing down on her as she stood frozen in front of the silver sedan, her palms damp, her throat tight. She had rehearsed this moment so many times, imagined it would feel triumphant, like stepping into a chapter of adulthood. Instead, it was turning into something ugly. The salesman leaned against the counter with a smirk that spread across his face like a stain. His voice carried through the empty showroom, sharp and casual, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You can't afford this car. People like you don't walk in here to buy. They come to look, maybe take a picture, then leave." The words hit her like cold water. For a second, she thought she had misheard. Her ears rang. She blinked at him, searching his face for a sign he was joking. But there was no playfulness in his tone, only mockery. Aaliyah tried to steady her breath. She had worked too hard, saved every paycheck from her tutoring job, stacked every scholarship, award letter in a neat folder. She was not a dreamer floating on fantasies. She had money in the bank, enough for a down payment, more than enough to prove she belonged here. But under the salesman's gaze, her confidence shrank. She could feel the stares of two older men across the room, potential customers pretending to scroll on their phones but clearly listening. The air seemed to thicken. Her chest burned. She forced her voice to stay calm. "I asked about the financing options. I didn't say I couldn't pay." He chuckled, tilting his head as if she were a child who had said something cute. "Financing, sweetheart. The monthly payments on this car are more than your rent. Why don't you check the pre-owned section down the road? Something more realistic." His eyes lingered on her sneakers, clean but scuffed at the edges, the faded college hoodie she had pulled on without thinking, her simple twists tied back. He was measuring her piece by piece and deciding she was unworthy. A wave of heat rushed up her neck. She wanted to argue, to slam her bank statement down on his desk, to scream that she had earned this. But her throat closed, her words tangled, and all she managed was a whisper. "You don't know me." The salesman laughed again, this time louder, theatrically, as though she had just proven his point. "Oh, I know enough. This car isn't for you, trust me." Her stomach dropped. She looked at the sleek silver hood gleaming under the lights. The very car she had dreamed of for months. The one she had pinned to her vision board and kept as her phone wallpaper. It was supposed to represent freedom, independence, the next step in her life. Now it sat like a trophy she was not allowed to touch. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. For a second, she thought about ignoring it, but her hand moved on its own. She unlocked the screen, her fingers trembling, and pulled up her messages. Her father's name glowed on the screen from the last conversation they had that morning. She typed with shaky thumbs, "Dad, can you come here, please?" Her reflection in the glass showed eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. Across the showroom, the salesman had already turned his back, muttering something to a colleague. Aaliyah stood there, fists clenched around her phone, the hum of the lights louder than ever. She felt stripped bare, small, invisible. And yet beneath the humiliation something else stirred. A quiet, stubborn fire. Because she knew one thing. For certain, her father would come, and when he did, everything in this dealership would change. Aaliyah had always been the kind of girl who dreamed with her hands busy. When other kids talked about what car they would buy someday, she didn't just imagine it. She opened a notebook, made columns, and started calculating how much she would need, how many hours she would have to work, and how long it would take if she saved every dollar she could spare. It wasn't that she was obsessed with cars. It was freedom she wanted. Freedom to move without asking anyone for a ride. Freedom to take her little brother to basketball practice when her mom was stuck late at work. Freedom to drive herself to school instead of waiting on a bus that sometimes showed up 20 minutes late. The car meant she could be in charge of her own life. Her dad always told her, "Discipline beats talent every time." And she had carried those words like a shield. When friends invited her out and she wanted to say yes, she sometimes said no because the tutoring shift at the community center paid better. When she wanted new clothes, she closed her laptop instead, reminding herself that every $30 she didn't spend was 30 more toward her dream. At 17, she already had the quiet habits of someone twice her age. She tracked her savings in a green binder, each page a snapshot of her progress. She kept receipts, wrote down side hustles, counted and recounted. That binder was her treasure. But more than money, what pushed her forward was the face she saw. The mirror. Aaliyah was a young black woman in a city where expectations came low and stereotypes came fast. People assumed things about her before she even spoke. Too loud, too distracted, too broke. She wanted to prove, not to them but to herself, that she was more. That she could walk into any place with her head high and know she had earned her spot. Her father understood. Marcus Johnson was not the kind of man who bragged. He was tall, with a calm presence that filled a room without him raising his voice. He worked in construction management, but not as one of the men in the hard hats. He owned the company, though almost no one outside his circle knew it. He drove a modest black SUV, wore simple shirts, and never flashed jewelry. To strangers, he looked like a regular man living a regular life. That was how he liked it. For Aaliyah, he was more than a provider. He was her coach, her sounding board, her safety net. He was the reason she believed she could aim high. She remembered late nights sitting at the kitchen table while he showed her how compound interest worked on a napkin. She remembered him teaching her how to shake someone's hand firmly and look them in the eye, telling her respect was earned both ways. She remembered his voice steady and clear. The world will underestimate you, baby girl. Let them. Just don't you underestimate yourself. Her parents had divorced years earlier, but Marcus never missed his weekends with his kids. Aaliyah often stayed over at his apartment, a simple 2-bedroom with neatly stacked paperwork on the desk and basketball sneakers lined up by the door. On Sunday mornings, he cooked pancakes while jazz floated through the speakers, and they laughed about his clumsy flips that always landed crooked. Money was never something they flaunted. Aaliyah didn't know all the details, but she knew her dad had more than most. She saw it in the way he paid her tuition balance in full, in the way he quietly covered her cousin's medical bill without making a fuss, in the way he never complained when something broke because he could fix it or replace it. Still, he taught her not to depend on anyone else's wallet. The sweetest victories are the ones you earn yourself, he would say, pointing to her binder of savings. He wanted her to feel the pride of paying for her car with her own money. That was why, even though he could have bought it outright, for her birthday, he didn't. He wanted her to know she had done it, and she had. Her scholarship awards alone stacked into the thousands. She had earned every cent with late nights studying, early mornings reading, weekends spent practicing essays, until her hand cramped. On top of that, she worked at the library after school, tutored middle school kids on Saturdays, and even sold custom phone cases online. She hustled in quiet ways, stacking bills slowly, never wasting what she had. By the end of her junior year, she had enough for a down payment and a little cushion for insurance. It wasn't a flashy car she wanted, just something dependable and sleek, a car she could drive to college and maybe keep after graduation. When she saw the silver sedan online, it felt perfect, just the right mix of style and strength. She spent weeks preparing for the dealership visit. She printed her pay stubs, highlighted her scholarship award letters, organized everything in a folder with tabs. She even practiced how she would ask about financing, how she would calmly explain her budget. She wanted the interaction to be smooth, professional, but all the preparation in the world couldn't protect her from prejudice. When she walked into that showroom earlier that day, she was nervous but excited. She had pictured shaking hands with the dealer, test driving the car, maybe snapping a photo to send her dad. What she got instead was laughter, the kind that wasn't shared but directed, sharp and cutting. Standing there now after the sting of his words, her mind wandered back through all those nights of saving, all the hours she could have spent relaxing, but chose not to. She thought of the binder sitting on her desk at home, the neat rows of numbers that told her she had every right to be here. Her chest ached. She wanted to scream at the salesman that he was wrong, that she was more than the hoodie, more than the sneakers, more than whatever box he had shoved her into. But she also knew she didn't need to prove herself to him. Not yet, because she had sent the message, and Marcus Johnson did not ignore calls from his daughter. The salesman didn't stop at that first insult. He seemed to enjoy the way Aaliyah's face stiffened, how her voice faltered, how the room had tilted in his favor. He smelled weakness and he wanted to press it. "So tell me," he said, walking around the silver sedan with exaggerated steps. "Do you even have a driver's license yet? Or are you just here because TikTok told you to manifest your dream?" "Car." The colleague he had whispered to earlier laughed under his breath. Aaliyah heard it and felt her cheeks burn hotter. She wanted to disappear into the polished floor, vanish into the rows of vehicles gleaming under the lights. Instead, she gripped her phone tighter in her hand, knuckles white. "Yes," she managed, her voice thin but steady. "I've had my license since last year." "Cute," he replied. "And insurance? Do you know what full coverage on a car like this costs every month? Sweetheart, you'd need 2 jobs just to keep it on the road. Believe me, I've seen this before. Kids, like you walk in with big dreams, no money, and they get mad when reality hits. I'm just saving you the embarrassment." Each word dripped with mock sympathy, like he was doing her a favor. His tone carried the sharpness of someone who thought cruelty was efficiency. Aaliyah's eyes darted to the 2 men across the showroom. One of them raised an eyebrow at the exchange. The other shook his head as though he'd already decided who was right. Their presence made the humiliation worse. She felt like she was on stage, her dignity stripped bare for an audience that didn't even care. She straightened her back, but her throat still closed. "I came here prepared. I'm not wasting your time." The salesman leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it sting. "Your being here is the waste." Words cut deep. For a split second, Aaliyah stopped breathing. She replayed them in her mind, each syllable hammering into her chest. He wasn't just saying she couldn't buy the car. He was saying she didn't belong. Her chest swelled with a sharp ache. She had lived with whispers and stares before. The way store clerks followed her in shops. The way strangers clutched their bags when she walked by. But this was different. This was direct, naked, unapologetic. He had stripped away every ounce of politeness and left her standing there with nothing but raw shame. Her thumb hovered over the phone screen. She wanted to check if her dad had read her message, but she couldn't let the salesman see her desperation. She forced her hands behind her back, nails biting into her palms. He stepped away with a theatrical sigh, pulling a folder from the counter. "Look, I'll do you a favor. There's a nice little Honda Civic on the used lot that's probably more your speed. Low miles, cheap payments. You can even get the approval without a cosigner. That sound better?" His smile was wide and bright, but his eyes were empty. He wasn't offering kindness, he was offering dismissal. Aaliyah's chest tightened. She thought of her dad's words, the ones he'd repeated so many times. Respect goes both ways. If someone tries to take yours, stand tall. She lifted her chin. "I didn't come here for a Civic. I came for this car. The sedan." The salesman blinked, almost surprised she had pushed back. Then the smirk returned. "Stubborn, I'll give you that." He glanced at her hoodie again, then at her sneakers. "But stubborn doesn't pay bills." Her lips trembled. She bit down hard, determined not to let him see her cry. Crying would feel like confirming everything he believed about her. Weak, emotional, childish. She would not give him that. The colleague across the room called out, "Hey, Rick, you need me to bring out the keys for the Civic?" Rick, so that was his name. Rick grinned. "Not yet. We're just having a little reality check over here." The laugh echoed in Aaliyah's ears. She clenched her jaw so hard it hurt. Every part of her wanted to shout, to fling her binder of papers in his face, to prove with numbers and letters that she was not what he thought. But she remembered her dad's steady voice, patience, precision, timing. She glanced at the glass door. The parking lot outside was blinding with sun. Any moment now, her father's SUV would pull up. She imagined the sound of his footsteps, the calm authority in his voice, the way the entire room would shift the second he walked in. That image kept her standing tall when her knees threatened to buckle. Rick noticed her silence and mistook it for surrender. Good. You're quiet. Now maybe you're finally listening. But inside, Aaliyah wasn't surrendering. She was waiting. The fire that had sparked earlier was growing, steady and controlled, waiting for oxygen. She turned away from him and focused on the car. The sedan's silver paint glowed under the lights, flawless and smooth. She traced its shape with her eyes, memorizing it, reclaiming it. She refused to let his words poison her dream. Rick, meanwhile, leaned against the counter again, flipping casually through a brochure as though she were already dismissed. Don't take it personal. Not everyone is cut out for this kind of purchase. You'll thank me later. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. This time she didn't wait. She pulled it out, and her father's reply was there in bold letters. On I. My way. Her chest loosened. For the first time since she walked in, her shoulders dropped. The knot in her stomach didn't vanish, but it softened, replaced by a quiet assurance. Rick noticed her small smile. What's so funny? Aaliyah slipped the phone back into her pocket, her voice calm. Nothing, you'll see. Rick frowned, confused but didn't press further. The glass door across the showroom swung open, sunlight spilled in, and Marcus Johnson walked inside. The moment Marcus stepped through the door, the air in the showroom shifted. He was not flashy, not loud. He wore dark slacks, a plain blue button-down, and scuffed brown shoes. But something in the way he carried himself made people look up. His stride was measured, his shoulders square, his gaze steady. Aaliyah's breath caught in her throat. Relief washed over her so fast her knees almost gave. She wanted to run to him, to bury her face in his chest, and let all the humiliation spill out, but she didn't move. She stood tall, waiting for him to notice her, holding on to the dignity she still had left. Marcus's eyes swept the room, quick and sharp, before landing on his daughter. The way his face softened when he saw her was the only sign of warmth in him. Then his gaze slid to Rick. Rick straightened, adjusting his tie. He wasn't intimidated yet. To him, Marcus looked like just another middle-aged man with tired shoes and a quiet demeanor. Nothing to fear, sir, Rick said, plastering on his salesman's smile. Welcome, can I help you with something today? Marcus didn't answer right away. He walked to Aaliyah, placed a steady hand on her shoulder, and looked her in the eye. You all right? Her throat tightened. She wanted to say no, that she wasn't all right at all, but she nodded. Her voice came out thin. I'm okay now. Marcus gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Then he turned to Rick, his face unreadable. You're the salesman. Yes, sir, Rick replied. Rick Hamilton, and you are? Marcus Johnson. His tone was flat, his handshake absent. He didn't reach out. Rick tilted his head, studying him. Well, Mr. Johnson, your daughter and I were just discussing options. I explained to her that this particular car might be a little out of her range, but we've got some great pre-owned vehicles that… Stop. Marcus's voice cut through the air, quiet but sharp. The room stilled. Even the colleague across. The floor froze mid-step. Rick blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me? I said stop. Marcus repeated, his eyes steady. You don't need to explain. I heard enough. Aaliyah's chest swelled. That tone, controlled, low, precise, was the one her father used when he was done playing games. Rick tried to recover, chuckling nervously. Sir, I think you may have misunderstood. I was just trying to guide your daughter toward a more realistic… Marcus took a step closer. He wasn't a large man, but his presence seemed to grow with each word. What exactly did you say? To her? Rick hesitated. His smile faltered. I simply told her that this car might be beyond her budget. Marcus's eyes narrowed. That all? Rick shrugged, pretending casual confidence. Well, yes, I mean, she's young. I didn't want her wasting her time or mine, you understand. The colleague coughed into his hand, clearly uncomfortable. One of the men sitting across the room put his phone down, suddenly alert. Marcus's voice stayed calm. So you looked at my daughter and decided what she could or couldn't afford. Rick forced a smile. I'm experienced, sir. I can usually tell. It's not personal. Aaliyah's fists clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream. It was personal. But she stayed silent, letting her father's steady presence do the work. Marcus tilted his head slightly. And what gave you the right to make that decision for her? Rick shifted his weight, the first crack in his composure showing. He glanced at his colleague, who suddenly found something fascinating on the desk in front of him. Look, Rick said, his smile thinning. I was only being honest. Kids don't usually walk in ready to buy something like this. I didn't mean any harm. Marcus didn't blink. His silence stretched, heavy, making Rick fidget. Finally, Marcus spoke. You humiliated my daughter in front of customers. In front of your colleague. You treated her like she was nothing. That's harm. Rick's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, his smirk faltered completely. Aaliyah's heart pounded. She had imagined her dad arriving, but not like this. Not with such quiet control. Marcus turned to his daughter again. Did you ask your questions clearly? She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. Did you have your paperwork ready? Yes. He faced Rick again. His voice was even softer now, which somehow made it more dangerous. Then the problem wasn't her. It was you. The words landed like stones in the silent room. Rick shifted again, tugging at his tie. Sir, with all due respect, Marcus raised a hand, stopping him. Respect is earned. Right now, you don't have any. The air seemed to thicken. The colleague in the corner shifted uneasily, and the two men pretending not to watch were now openly staring. Aaliyah's phone buzzed again in her pocket, but she didn't look. She didn't need to. The only sound she cared about was her father's voice, steady and sharp, slicing through the arrogance that had weighed her down. Marcus stepped back slightly, his posture relaxed but his eyes unyielding. Now, you're going to answer her original question, clearly, about financing options. And you're going to do it without another smirk, without another insult, understand? Rick swallowed, his confidence unraveling. Of course, sir. Marcus's gaze lingered on him a moment longer. Then he turned back to his daughter, giving her another reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. Go ahead, baby girl, ask again. Aaliyah's chest rose. For the first time since walking into the dealership, she felt the weight on her back lift, and she asked her question again. This time, with her voice strong and clear, Rick cleared his throat and flipped open the folder he had been holding earlier. His hands were slightly unsteady, though he tried to hide it behind a professional smile. Right, financing. Well, for a vehicle like this sedan, with a sticker, price of $36,000, most customers choose a 60-month term. That puts the monthly payment around $700, give or take, depending on credit and down payment. Aaliyah nodded slowly, just as she had rehearsed. And what would it be if the down payment was $10,000? Rick hesitated. His eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Aaliyah, as though he still didn't believe she was serious. Well, with 10 down, that would lower the monthly to maybe $500. Still significant for someone just starting out. Don't talk about her, Marcus interrupted quietly. Just answer the math. Rick forced a chuckle, tapping his calculator. Yes, sir, around $500. And if the down payment was $20,000? Marcus pressed, his voice sharp but calm. Rick blinked, clearly thrown off. That would cut it down closer to $300. Good, Marcus said. Now you're doing your job. A hush had settled over the showroom. Even the suet, background music, faint jazz from hidden speakers seemed quieter. The colleague behind the desk kept glancing up, pretending to work but unable to tear his eyes away. The two men across the room were no longer hiding their attention. One of them actually pulled out his phone, holding it low, recording. Aaliyah stood taller, her binder in her bag but no longer needed. Her father's calm precision was enough. He wasn't just defending her. He was forcing Rick to treat her like the customer she was. But Marcus wasn't done. He stepped closer to the counter. You made a judgment when my daughter walked in. Here. You decided she couldn't afford this car. You dismissed her before she finished a sentence. Why? Rick's lips tightened. Sir, with all respect, It's standard practice to get a sense of a customer's situation. We can't assume every visitor is qualified. Marcus cut him off again. That's exactly what you did. You assumed. Based on what? Her age? Her hoodie? Her skin? The words dropped heavy into the air. Aaliyah felt her pulse quicken. She hadn't said the word aloud, but her father had, slicing through the fog with precision. Rick stammered. I treat every customer the same. No, Marcus said firmly. If you did, she wouldn't have had to text me in tears. You don't treat every customer the same. You treat them how you judge them. Rick opened his mouth, closed it again. He was sweating now, small beads forming at his hairline. Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice still low. And you judged wrong. My daughter came here prepared. She has her financing organized, her paperwork ready, her savings accounted for. She's more prepared than most of your customers. And you laughed at her. Rick's face reddened. I didn't mean, yes, you did. Marcus's voice was sharp as glass. You meant every word, and you said it loud enough for strangers to hear. The man across the room with the phone shifted to get a clearer angle. His screen glowed, capturing every second. Rick tried to laugh again, but it cracked. Let's not make this bigger than it is. We're just talking about a car. Marcus straightened, his full height commanding. No, we're talking about respect. My daughter earned her place here. She worked, she saved, she prepared. You looked at her and decided she didn't matter. That's not salesmanship, that's arrogance. The colleague behind the desk finally stood, clearing his throat nervously. Rick, maybe you should sit down, Marcus said without looking at him. The man obeyed. Aaliyah's chest swelled with pride, her humiliation slowly transforming into awe. She had seen her father's quiet strength at home, in family. Batters, but never like this. Never this sharp, this undeniable. Rick fumbled with the brochure, his confidence slipping through his fingers. All right, Mr. Johnson, let's reset. Clearly your daughter has resources. If she wants the car, we can certainly discuss numbers. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Now you want to discuss? After trying to humiliate her out of the room? Rick stammered again. It was a misunderstanding. Stop calling it that, Marcus said firmly. It was disrespect. Own it. The silence stretched. The man with the phone kept recording. The colleague behind the desk avoided eye contact. Finally, Rick muttered, I may have spoken too harshly. Marcus tilted his head. Say it plain. Rick swallowed. I was wrong to dismiss her. The words were heavy, reluctant, but they filled the air. Marcus nodded slowly. Good. Now let me be clear. You don't know who walks through your doors. You don't know their story. You don't know what they carry. What you do know is how you choose to treat them. Today you chose wrong, and now everyone in this room knows it. Rick's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly on the counter. Marcus pulled a slim folder from his bag and laid it flat on the desk. He opened it calmly, each movement deliberate. Inside were neatly clipped documents, tax returns, bank, statements, and ownership papers for his construction company. He turned the folder so Rick could see. This is who my daughter's father is, Marcus said evenly. And more important, this, he placed a hand on Aaliyah's shoulder, is who she is. A young woman who worked hard enough to stand in this showroom with every right to buy what she wants. Don't ever forget that. Rick's eyes darted across the papers, his face draining of what little confidence he had left. Marcus snapped the folder shut, his movements precise. Now, bring the financing manager. My daughter will be purchasing this car in her name. The order wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of authority that couldn't be argued with. Rick nodded quickly, his voice trembling. Of course. Right away. He hurried toward the back offices, his polished shoes tapping frantically against the floor. The room remained silent for a moment. Then the man across the room with the phone lowered it, shaking his head slowly. Damn, he muttered under his breath. Aaliyah finally let out the breath she'd been holding. She turned to her father, eyes shining, voice breaking. Thank you. Marcus looked at her softly now, the steel in his face melting away. You don't thank me, baby girl. You earned this. I just made sure they saw it. Her throat tightened. For the first time since walking in, she felt proud again. Proud, not just because she was buying the car, but because she had stood through the fire and come out taller. The silver sedan gleamed beside her, no longer a symbol of rejection, but of triumph. And for the first time, Aaliyah believed it truly belonged to her. Rick had barely returned from the back office with the finance manager when Marcus spoke again. His voice carried through the showroom, calm, but slicing through the tension like a razor. Before we go any further, let's make one thing clear. Marcus pulled the folder of documents from his bag again, opening it with a slow, deliberate motion. Everything you thought you knew about my daughter, about who she is, about what she can afford, is wrong. Every single judgment you made, every mocking word, every smirk, you did it without knowing anything. He placed the documents on the counter, spreading them carefully. Bank statements showing Aaliyah's savings, scholarship award letters stacked neatly, and the ownership papers for his company. Each sheet was clean, precise, professional. Rick's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "Sir, I didn't—" "You did," Marcus interrupted. "You laughed at her. You belittled her. You assumed she didn't belong here. You did it in front of witnesses, which means everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." The finance manager looked around nervously. He was already uncomfortable with the situation. Marcus's authority filled the room in a way no polite explanation could undo. Aaliyah stood beside her father, gripping his arm lightly, feeling the fire that had been building all day spread through her chest. She realized she wasn't just witnessing justice. She was part of it. Marcus leaned toward Rick. "And since you decided to be cruel in front of cameras, let's make sure it stays that way." He lifted his phone and began recording, starting with Rick's face. "This is a record," Marcus said slowly, each word deliberate, "of the treatment my daughter received today. Every word, every action, every judgment you made without knowing her story. This is on you." Rick swallowed, suddenly aware that the colleague who had been recording the earlier exchange was still filming. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by flustered discomfort. "Let me be very clear," Marcus continued. "You do not know my daughter's life. You do not know her discipline, her preparation, her savings, her scholarships, or the businesses her family owns. You judged her based on her appearance. That is unacceptable, and it will be documented." He gestured toward the finance manager. "Bring in the rest of the paperwork. Let's finalize the purchase in her name with full transparency." As the finance manager returned with the forms, Marcus didn't let Rick off the hook. "I want statement," he said. "A public acknowledgement of your treatment of my daughter to correct the record." Rick looked like he might argue, but Marcus didn't give him a chance. "I'm giving you the opportunity to do the right thing. Your choice is simple. Admit you were wrong or let the record show it for everyone to see." The colleague who had been recording earlier adjusted his phone and started live streaming the confrontation. The scene shifted from a private humiliation to a public accountability moment. Every eye in the showroom turned toward Rick. Customers, employees, anyone who had walked in or passed by could now witness the moment he had thought he controlled. Rick's lips trembled. Finally he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. I was wrong. I should not have mocked her. I apologize." Marcus nodded, his expression calm, but the weight behind it was undeniable. "Say it clearly, on record, for everyone." Rick raised his voice slightly, the camera capturing every word. "I apologize to Aaliyah Johnson. I was wrong to judge her. I treated her unfairly, and I am sorry." Aaliyah exhaled slowly, a laugh escaping her throat. Relief, triumph, and vindication all mixed in one sharp, satisfying moment. Her father placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Now," Marcus said, turning to the finance manager, "we can proceed." The purchase went smoothly after that. The finance manager walked them through the forms, explaining how the down payment, insurance, and monthly installments would work. Aaliyah signed the paperwork herself, the binder of savings still tucked safely in her bag, now unnecessary as proof of her worth. By the time she stepped out of the dealership with the keys in her hand, sunlight reflecting off the silver sedan, she realized something profound. The humiliation she had felt earlier, the judgment, the laughter, the assumptions, they had all been turned into a public lesson. Every step Marcus had taken had been calculated. Calm arrival, measured confrontation, documentary proof, live recording. Nothing was left to chance. Every smirk, every taunt, every assumption Rick had made was now documented for the world to see. Aaliyah slid into the driver's seat, heart still racing. She looked over at her father, who nodded, quiet and proud. She realized that today wasn't just about a car. It was about showing the world, in undeniable terms, that preparation, hard work, and dignity cannot be dismissed. Even as they drove away, the live video from the showroom had already started trending. Comments poured in, messages from strangers cheering, from others sharing similar experiences, from parents praising Marcus for the way he had protected his daughter while holding the abuser accountable. Aaliyah realized the power of documentation, the importance of standing firm, and the value of a parent's guidance. Her humiliation had been real, but it had been transformed into empowerment, and the world had watched it happen. By the time Aaliyah and her father pulled out of the dealership lot, the video was already circulating. Within minutes, friends began texting screenshots, strangers were tagging her in comments, and the notifications on her phone vibrated incessantly. The clip captured everything: Rick's smirk, his laughter, the casual cruelty, and then Marcus's quiet, devastating dismantling of every assumption. The moment Marcus pulled out the documentation and forced the apology was replayed on multiple accounts. People couldn't stop sharing it. The raw justice, the calm authority, the dignity restored, it resonated with everyone who had ever been dismissed, underestimated, or humiliated. The dealership's public relations team scrambled. Within an hour, a statement appeared online, carefully worded, apologizing for the misunderstanding and promising to review training for all employees to ensure customers are treated with respect. But the internet wasn't satisfied. Everyone had seen the footage. Everyone had witnessed the arrogance and the humiliation. The apology felt hollow against the undeniable video evidence. Aaliyah scrolled through the comments with her father sitting beside her. People shared their own stories, applauded her courage, and praised Marcus for standing firm. Finally, a parent showing how it's done, one comment read. This is how you teach dignity and accountability. Another said, this is the kind of moment we needed to see. Thank you for showing the world that preparation and respect matter. The virality gave Aaliyah a new kind of validation. It wasn't about fame. It was about witnessing a public reckoning. She felt the sting of humiliation from earlier melt away, replaced by pride, by certainty, by empowerment. Across social media, discussions started to form around broader issues: racial bias, judgment based on appearance, the assumptions people make every day. Some reporters picked up the story, interviewing Marcus and Aaliyah for local news segments. Their message was clear: preparation, hard work, and self-respect cannot be dismissed. Back at home, Aaliyah's mother watched the news clip with wide eyes. You stood up so well, she said. And your father, he handled it perfectly. Aaliyah smiled, exhausted but exhilarated. It wasn't just him. He made sure they couldn't ignore it, that everyone could see it. The dealership eventually faced internal consequences. Rick was reassigned to a training program on customer relations, and the showroom manager confirmed in a public statement that all employees would undergo sensitivity training. Marcus and Aaliyah weren't looking for revenge, but the public exposure ensured accountability. For Aaliyah, the silver sedan was more than a car. It was a symbol, a testament to her effort, her father's guidance, and the power of turning cruelty into accountability. The experience had transformed her. She no longer feared being underestimated or dismissed. She understood the strength of preparation, presence, and evidence. The story also inspired others. Local schools began sharing the video as an example of advocacy, teaching students about confidence, preparation, and standing up to injustice. Online communities celebrated the father-daughter team, highlighting that dignity and strategy could dismantle even the most arrogant authority. Aaliyah looked at the car parked in the driveway later that night. The city lights reflected off the silver hood, gleaming like a trophy. But it wasn't vanity she felt. It was triumph, quiet and profound. She had been underestimated, humiliated, and yet, through careful resolve and the guidance of her father, she had emerged victorious. And while the dealership would try to smooth over the situation, the world had already seen the truth. That truth was now out there, documented, undeniable, inspiring. Marcus turned to her as she ran her hand across the hood. Remember, baby girl, this isn't about the car. It's about knowing your worth and standing your ground. Never let anyone take that away from you. Aaliyah smiled, feeling the weight of the day lift completely. I won't, she said. Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside the quiet driveway, she felt unstoppable. Today was a victory, not just for her, but for anyone who had ever been dismissed or judged unfairly. Within 24 hours, the video had millions of views. Notifications on Aaliyah's phone flooded nonstop. Messages from strangers who had shared their own stories of being dismissed. Notes from parents praising her courage. And comments from people inspired to confront prejudice in their own lives. The story wasn't just viral. It became a movement in microcosm, a reminder that accountability could be public and dignity could be defended. Aaliyah and her father watched the analytics climb together. Every share, every comment, every like was a quiet victory, a signal that what they had done resonated far beyond the dealership. She counted numbers in her head, not because she loved metrics, but because each figure represented someone witnessing the truth, someone learning from their experience. In less than a day, the video had been shared more than 2.3 million times. Over 10,000 comments were pouring in, filled with empathy, admiration, and solidarity. The numbers were staggering, yet they were more than statistics. They were proof that real change begins with visibility. The impact extended beyond social media. Local news outlets picked up the story, emphasizing the lessons of preparation, persistence, and self-respect. Online forums debated the ethics of judgment and prejudice in sales and service industries. Schools began using the video as a case study for teaching confidence, critical thinking, and standing up for oneself. Marcus and Aaliyah were invited to speak about their experience at community events, inspiring young people to claim their worth unapologetically. For Aaliyah, the epiphany was deeply personal. The humiliation she had endured transformed into empowerment because her father had guided her through the storm with calm precision. She realized that the lesson wasn't just about confronting prejudice. It was about preparation, strategy, and courage in the face of arbitrary authority. Every document, every fact, every ounce of dignity meticulously preserved by Marcus became a shield, demonstrating that truth could overpower arrogance. She looked at her silver sedan parked in the driveway that night, reflecting city lights like liquid silver across its hood. The car was a symbol, yes, but also a tangible reminder of persistence, hard work, and respect earned. Her binder of savings, the scholarship letters, the countless hours of part-time work, all of it had culminated in this victory. She hadn't just purchased a car. She had claimed her space in a world that often underestimated her. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. Remember, this isn't about winning against someone else. It's about understanding your worth and standing firmly in it. You've seen today that respect can be demanded with evidence, courage, and dignity. That lesson will serve you far beyond this car, beyond this dealership. Aaliyah nodded, absorbing every word. She thought of the millions watching, the strangers cheering, the students learning from her experience. She understood now that her story had power. Not the kind that comes from money or status, but the kind that comes from truth, perseverance, and the refusal to let others define you. The comments continued to pour in, thousands of voices across, the globe saying variations of the same message. I see you, I believe you. Thank you for showing me how to stand tall. Aaliyah read a few aloud to her father, her voice shaking with a mix of awe and pride. This is bigger than a car, Marcus said. It's a statement. Every time someone tries to dismiss you, you show them your strength, backed by facts and unwavering resolve. Aaliyah's eyes sparkled. She realized that while the dealership may have attempted to define her worth, she had rewritten the narrative herself. And now, the world was watching her story unfold, learning from it, inspired, by it, sharing it. As the night deepened, she sat behind the wheel, keys heavy in her hand, heart light with purpose. She knew this was only the beginning. One day she would tell her own children this story, so they too could understand that preparation, courage, and dignity were weapons against prejudice, and that truth, when wielded decisively, could turn the tables on even the most arrogant authority. She looked over at her father, smiled, and said quietly, "We did it." Marcus smiled back. "No, you did it. I just made sure everyone saw." The city hummed around them, the car, the victory, the millions watching online. It all converged into one undeniable truth. Standing up for yourself, armed with preparation, evidence, and dignity, could change everything. And now, Aaliyah's story was out there for everyone, a spark igniting countless others to rise. If this story inspired you, give it a like to show your support. Subscribe to the channel to catch more real, powerful stories of courage and triumph. And most importantly, share your own experiences in the comments below. Your story matters, and it could inspire someone else to stand tall, just like Aaliyah did. Don't keep your voice silent. The world is listening.